All right. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to the Practical SQL Server HADR show. And the topics that I cover here are all about making a SQL Server high availability and disaster recovery practical. If you're a SQL Server DBA or a sysadmin or somebody who's been given responsibility to take care of SQL Server databases and making them highly available and making them ready for disaster recovery, sometimes it can be overwhelming, could be confusing, and sometimes it's just not practical based on some of the documentation you've seen. I am back in my home office so far, and I kind of missed this. I kind of missed the setup. I tried listening to some of the old recordings in the past when I was on the road, and it was, I want to say it's underwhelming, mainly because of course, the fact that I'm using a good quality camera with a good quality audio is totally different than when I'm just simply using my phone. But the benefit of that is I could do this everywhere I am. All I have to do is turn on my phone and start recording. Anyway, the topic of this week's conversation came up from a discussion that I had with a client recently, where he signed up for my SQL Server Always On Availability Groups, the Senior DBA's Ultimate Field Guide, and when I before they get started, I do a quick survey and ask them, what are your expectations? And he wrote, I don't want to say a very long uh, comment about what his expectations are. And then I started diving in and asking questions about, so tell me more. And the comment was he wants to be confident in deploying SQL Server Always On Availability Groups. He's a consultant working for a consulting company, and he is being assigned to projects where Always On Availability Groups are involved. And it's interesting because it's one thing when you're managing an availability groups as an in-house DBA or somebody who is a full-time DBA working for one company, and you kind of know the environment. But it's totally different when you're a consultant, you're at a client's or a customer site, and you would start looking at their environment. And every once in a while, you get to see different environments at the same time, and not knowing how to fix problems, not knowing how to address issues, and in some cases, not knowing what guidance and recommendation to give to the client. And, you know, the fact that you wanted to improve your technical expertise as an IT professional is a given. I mean, the fact still remains we want to become really, really good at what we do. We want to be known as a subject matter expert, and it's just part of growth. The way we grow as an individual. Part of that is learning more. And in the case of our line of work as technical professionals, we want to become very good. In fact, I go back to some of the Microsoft's categories or rankings. Level 100, you're starting out, you're getting introduced in the field. Level 200 is when where he has a little bit of a background. Level 300 is a little bit more advanced. Level 400 is more expert level. And we want to see that progression as part of our growth. Plus, of course, the fact that you have a ton of advantages, benefits of becoming a subject matter expert. For one, if you're a junior DBA or somebody who's doing operation, you get stuck with doing the same thing over and over again. It becomes repetitive, it becomes boring. And even though you want to progress and grow and take on more exciting responsibilities, it just seems like you're not having that opportunity because people perceive you as somebody who does not have the technical expertise needed to get the job done. I mean, yeah, looking at SQL Server agent jobs, looking at whether the backup's completed or not, it's pretty boring. Like deploying scripts, the developer will give you scripts, look at it, and there is this desire for us to grow. It's just human nature, right? And it becomes when you're stuck in your job, doing the same thing over and over and over again, it becomes boring, monotonous. And this is where a lot of people end up becoming burned out. Not necessarily too tired. It's just that not having the opportunity to do more because they know they're capable of more. And on the flip side, of course, when you're a subject matter expert in a specific technology, it feels good to know that you are confident enough to get the job done, resolve issues, deal with issues, not to mention, commanding the respect of your colleagues and peers. I hear people talk about, hey, we deployed an availability group, but because people think, or my colleagues think, I don't have the skills, they outsource the building of the availability group to a consultant, an external vendor. And it feels good to know that your opinion matters, that your recommendations have weight. And that's huge. Of course, it also opens up a ton of opportunities like getting promoted, getting that salary increase, or even applying for a new job opportunity. And so there's there's also this way of thinking where in order for you to become a subject matter expert, you got to have credentials. And quite frankly, though, a lot of people working in tech don't have credential. I don't have a computer science degree, and I don't have an IT or computer engineering or anything tech related degree when I started doing high availability and disaster recovery. Um, I have established myself as a subject matter expert on SQL Server high availability and disaster recovery even before I got my Microsoft Certified Master certification. And uh, the thing is, people put so much emphasis on credentials that they think, oh, so long as I have the credential, I could be perceived of as a subject matter expert, not realizing there's a ton of people out there who have tons of letters after their name with a ton of certifications, and they think that's going to give them street creds or credibility. I'm not discounting that. I'm just saying that it goes beyond that. And of course, there is no ignoring the fact that you definitely need to have technical expertise. That is first and foremost a I want to say it's a requirement if you want to establish yourself as a subject matter expert. But the thing here is this: people, tech professionals, simply focus on that. They put so much effort and emphasis on the tech skills that it becomes so overwhelming because with the rapid uh, uh, changes in technology, like 20 years ago, SQL Server was just one thing that all you need to do is learn the relational database engine and you're good. Now there's SQL Server on Linux, there's Microsoft Azure and doing everything on the cloud. How do you become a subject matter expert? And it becomes overwhelming when you start to see this influx of information that everything's just going so fast. Even the documentation sometimes is constantly changing that you don't really know what information would be valid when it comes to testing your technical expertise. And I want to share with you three things that not only do I embed or include in my SQL Server Always On Available Groups training program, but also some of the things that I've learned personally working in tech for the past 20 plus years now, looking back, and how it helped me achieve the level, the advanced or the expert level when it comes to working with SQL Server high availability and disaster recovery. I want to start with, and this is not what most people think, because again, when it comes to building credibility and establishing or becoming an expert on a certain subject matter, most technical professionals think it's all about technical expertise. It's not. I just want to put it out there. It's not all about technical expertise. And I want to share with you three things that I've learned personally and what I teach in and the people who go through my training program. And if you have your pen and paper ready, take notes because this will blow your mind. Because when I started learning this, I thought, wow, it's that simple. Not easy, but it's that simple. The first thing, and this is something that I've learned early on when I was starting out. The first thing is that in order to become a subject matter expert, you have to be very clear about what it is that you want to be an expert on. You have to be very clear about what you want to be an expert on. When you're working with a platform like, say, for instance, SQL Server, and you're just starting out, the basis of what you want to learn and the skills that you want to build is primarily dependent on your job responsibilities. You look at your job responsibilities, you look at the tasks that you're assigned. Most of the time, what you would focus on learning and harnessing and building your technical skills on will be based on stuff that you're supposed to be doing on a daily basis, right? And you know, in the past, it was easy. Like I said, when SQL Server was simply a relational database engine, you don't have to worry about, I need to learn about stretching my availability group to the cloud. I don't need to worry about BI and non-structured data or anything outside or analytics. It's just a relational database engine. But even back then, it's still overwhelming because you have to worry about performance tuning. Do I focus on performance tuning? But then what if you don't have the opportunity to work on performance tuning or query tuning or index improvements? What if you don't have those opportunities? What if you're starting out as a junior DBA or sysadmin working with SQL Server, and all you were given is basically look at the SQL Server agent jobs and see if they succeed. And then you start looking at, okay, learning more about SQL Server agent. Next thing you know, you're very, very good at SQL Server agent. Oh, but then 6 months later, you're given this project to work on performance tuning, and now your focus is more on performance tuning. Like I said, it can easily become overwhelming because there's just so many things to consider. And I'm just talking about SQL Server here. I'm not even talking about the entire Microsoft Data Platform offerings, where do I need to learn Azure Synapse? Do I need to learn Azure SQL DB? Do I need to learn Azure in general? It becomes overwhelming. And so the first step to becoming a subject matter expert is to become very clear about what it is that you want to be an expert on. It was very easy for me to become a jack of all trades. I'm Asian. We are trained. Part of our culture is to learn how to do everything on your own. It was very easy for me to go through and learn as much as I can from just about any other technology. It's one of the reasons why I did SharePoint, System Center, IIS, Windows, DNS, network, and on the side, development like .NET, VB, C Sharp. And at that point, it was very easy for me to fall into trying to learn everything. And you can't be a subject matter expert if you're trying to learn everything. Because by the time you have learned a thing or two about one aspect, you need to learn more. And this is the challenge. So many things are coming up real fast, like just look at the Microsoft documentation, what's being introduced. We are coming up with SQL Server 2022, while most customers are still on SQL 2014 or 16, moving on to or upgrading to 2019. Yet Microsoft is now introducing SQL Server 2022. And unless you make a decision today on what you want to be very, very, very good at, you're going to be spinning your wheels and trying to figure out everything and trying to learn everything to a point where you get so exhausted that like, I'll give up. I don't want to keep doing this. And that simple decision of picking the technology that you want to specialize on, that in itself will get you in the right direction. Now, a lot of people were saying, well, I don't know what the future might look like. I don't know how would happen to the technology 12, 15 years down the road. Just pick one thing today. Just decide. Get really clear about what it is that you want to specialize on. If you decide, hey, I want to be a subject matter expert in performance tuning, pick that. Go with it. Don't ever think about, hey, well, what happened in 5 to 10 years? If you want to become really good in um, analytics, for instance, making Power BI reports, pick that, run with it, make a decision, and do something about it today. Don't wait. Don't think about, hey, what will happen? Because we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe the technology will disappear. I don't know. Somebody who specialized in notification services back then. I don't know what happened because Microsoft just killed it. Somebody who made a decision to, what was the other technology that they, there's a lot of Microsoft technologies, technology specific to SQL Server. Microsoft decided, hey, I want to, or they wanted to, what's the word I'm looking for? Deprecate. And then all of a sudden, like, okay, what's next? Just pick one today. Pick a technology and learn it. Put everything you have into it. Learn it as much as you can, because that is way better than you trying to figure out 25 other things you need to be doing right now. And a lot of people, especially when you're starting out, you don't know, because some people would say, I don't feel like doing this. Just pick one. And then in the long run, you start to think about, hey, is this something that I can keep doing? But again, you wouldn't know unless you start. That is way better than thinking about it for the next 5 years and still not specializing on something. Like I said, as somebody who is a generalist, again, most of the Asians out there would agree with me. We're generalists. It's very easy for us to pick up new things, learn things on our own, but then you're not a specialist. Pick one, run with it, learn as much as you can, and in the future, if let's say the technology is no longer valid, it's not viable, or the vendor, in this case Microsoft, decides we want to deprecate it, like database mirroring, you can easily pivot knowing that you built the skills to learn a specific technology. Although we're data professionals, you might want to look at trends if you want to pick a technology. A lot of people are saying, should I move to crypto or blockchain technology as a data professional? Totally up to you. Totally up to you. But the thing is, pick one, right? So that's the first thing. Be very clear about what you want to be an expert on. Pick one topic, pick one technology, and put all your effort, put all your focus and your energy pursuing that technology. If in the future you want to become a subject matter expert on something else, then do that. But right now, just pick one. Okay. I spent so much time on that because, again, a typical operational DBA or somebody who's doing operational work, you'll be doing a ton. You will be doing almost everything that is SQL Server, index tuning, security, performance, high availability and disaster recovery, infrastructure, name it. You'll be doing all of that. But the thing is, if you don't put your effort and you don't make a decision as to pursue one technology or one feature or one, I want to say one lane, then you're going to be stuck with becoming mediocre on everything. I made a decision to do HA and DR when I got exposed to the world of high availability and disaster recovery, working as a data center engineer. Not to mention, of course, I come from a country where we are kind of like the melting pot of natural disasters, typhoons, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, name it. And so I kind of have an inclination to dealing with disasters based on the experiences that I had growing up as a kid. And that was one thing until I realized, yeah, this is something that I really want to do. So that's the first one. Be very, very clear about what it is that you want to be an expert on. That's the first one. The second thing, the second secret to becoming a subject matter expert is to focus on concepts and principles rather than the tech details. And this is interesting because in my line of work, working with different customers, I get the opportunity to see different environments, different configurations, and most of the time, when people would implement a specific technology, the focus is on the technology itself. And there's nothing wrong with that because, again, like I said in the beginning, you still need to have deep technical expertise on the chosen field or the chosen technology that you decide to pursue. You cannot to become a subject matter expert. You have to be very, 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 very good at the technology that you decide to pursue. However, our natural tendencies as tech professionals is we zoom into the technology, not realizing that there's fundamentals and concepts behind it. I'll give you a very simple example. If you do advanced engineering mathematics, you might get so overwhelmed with the complexity of how to do certain calculations with advanced mathematics, not realizing they're all just a variation of the basics and fundamentals. And it is interesting because, let's say, for instance, I'm just going to throw in the cloud here. When the cloud was introduced, there's a lot of pushbacks, and I still see a lot of pushbacks from tech professionals because the way they look at the cloud is it is going to take over my job. I'm not going to be doing anything anymore. My company's going to fire me. Not realizing, and of course, with a constant evolution of how the cloud works, new features are being added, new technologies are being introduced. And because people are so focused on the tech, they forgot there's concepts and principles behind those technologies. And I see this a lot in my line of working with my customers. Is they would deploy a massively complex, or not even massively complex, 3 replica availability group. And for somebody who has not worked with it yet, it can be overwhelming. What is going on? What are the technologies involved? But when you start to really dig into the concepts, an availability group is simply replicating log records from the primary to the secondary. Think of it as real-time backup, copy, and restore. If you've worked with database mirroring before, the concepts apply. They remain the same. Implementation might be different, but the concepts and the principles remain. And like I said, I use the cloud a lot because it demonstrates how when you focus on the concepts and the principles, instead of technical implementations, it becomes easy for you to adopt a new technology or a new feature, right? And so the cloud, for instance, will give you compute, storage, and networking. These 3 main components have been there ever since the computing age started. Go back to the days of the mainframe. You got your compute, you got your storage, you got your networking. The storage might be tapes back then, rotating media. Go to the cloud, move to the cloud, you have compute, storage, and networking. These concepts and these principles remain. Of course, different vendors, different cloud providers will have different implementation of these concepts. However, it becomes overwhelming when we're so focused on the tech that we forget all of these things have existed even before. It's just a totally different implementation. The concepts will remain, the implementation might be different, and because of this, If you stick with the concepts and principles, it is very easy to transition into implementing the new technologies. And I remember I almost got into trouble with some of the folks at Microsoft Marketing back in the days when always on available groups were being introduced in 2011. I was telling people that always on available groups were simply a combination of database mirroring and Windows Server failover clustering, two technologies that have been there since 2005. And of course, the marketing folks don't want me to be telling people that because they want always on available groups to be the bright and shiny new feature that they want to introduce. But if you really do think about it, it's database mirroring sitting on top of Windows Server failover clustering. And the implementation might be different, but the underlying concepts still remain. And that what made it easy for me to transition from, database mirroring or not having a clue about always on available groups back then to simply deploying it, because I understood what Windows Server failover clustering is, what it does, how to implement it, and I have an understanding of what database mirroring did. I knew how to implement it, and so it was an easy transition for me. So when a new technology is introduced, all I have to do is what's the concept, what's the principle behind it, and what do I already know about this new technology? Which leads me to the third thing. The third thing is they go back to the basics. Subject matter experts go back to the basics. I know, it's boring, the basics. Trust me, if you go back to the basics and master the basics, this becomes the foundation for you to becoming a subject matter expert. Most people think that becoming a subject matter expert is knowing a lot, but the reality is becoming very, 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 very good at one thing, to a point where you start to make connections. You start to make associations with all the other technologies, mainly because you are a master of the basics. Again, technology has given us a ton of opportunities to explore different platforms, technologies, but then it also caused a lot of confusion. One feature, we think it's new, when the reality is it's just a rehash of a basic, of a fundamental. And I like talking about basics because even when a customer would reach out to me and ask me for guidance on their availability group or even their HA, I go back to the basics. If a customer wants me to deploy an always on availability group, I go back to what is your recovery objective, like recovery point, recovery time objective, and what's your SLA. That's basic. That's fundamental. There's no point in building or designing an HA or DR solution if you don't even know what the recovery point and recovery time objectives and your service level agreements are. We're just guessing. That's fundamental. Even before I go into the technical details of the implementation, I go back to the basics. And there are so many times when a customer would want to implement a new technology, go, yeah, we've heard about it. And then when I start asking the real questions like, what's your recovery point? What's your recovery time objective? What's your SLA? We end up totally scrapping their architecture because it's an overkill for what they really need. Or if they already have one, making it simple to make sure that it is not costing them a lot. Not to mention it's very confusing and very difficult to manage. Going back to the basics. And most people don't want to go back to the basics because it's boring, it's repetitive, it's the same thing over and over again. But again, as I mentioned in the beginning or earlier, subject matter expertise is not about knowing more. It is all about mastering the things that you already know. And the learning doesn't stop. And the challenge that most people face technically is that, a new feature is being introduced. How do I learn about this? I think I wrote a blog post a couple of years ago about the SQL Server 2005 features that you should be aware of. And I wrote this in 2020, 2016 or 2017 timeframe. And when you look at the title, people get turned off because they think, oh, 2005 should be deprecated in the year 2016. Well, true, but the technology remained the same. The basics, the fundamentals. I mentioned, I think in that blog post, I mentioned something about clustered column store indexes. Or again, the example that I used earlier, availability groups, failover clustering and database mirroring combined. Filtered index. This, I think, yeah, the filtered index thing is something that has been there since SQL Server 2008. And Microsoft is simply, I don't want to say rehash, but they're building on top of it. And so if you want to master, become a subject matter expert, you got to go back to the basics and the fundamentals. I still go back to learning about indexing, storage structures in the underlying relational database, going back to networking, security. All of these things are never going to go away. They're just going to look like a different variation of the same thing. And the mistake that a lot of people do is, yeah, I'll chase this new shiny thing because it's a new feature, it's on the cloud, I'll take the test, I'll learn it, and then they forget about it. And that's not what subject matter expertise really is. Sure, you may have the credential, but if you're not using it on a regular basis, it's just like a muscle. If you don't use a muscle for a couple of months, even, it atrophies. And it's the same thing with your skill. But in order for you to become really, really good at this specific skill, you have to go back to the basics and master the basics. I couldn't count the number of times that I would solve a problem just by going back to the basics and understanding and mastering the basics. So these are the three things, the three secrets to becoming a subject matter expert. Number one, you got to be very clear about the technology or the subject that you want to become an expert on. Make a decision, put a stake on the ground, decide that this is something that you want to pursue, and put all of your effort and resources and energy on that thing. Okay? There's something about being focused that gets you to achieve your goal. That's one. The second thing is that you need to focus on the concepts and the fundamentals rather than the technical details. The technical details, sometimes there's just so many things in there, and it makes you a little bit more confused. But when you build on, or rather when you focus on the concepts and the fundamentals, it becomes easier for you to understand the technical implementation. So focus on the concepts, the fundamentals first, right? Or the principles first. And the third thing is going back to the basics and mastering the basics. It may be boring, it may be repetitive, but a lot of the complex problems that I've faced and my clients faced can be easily resolved by going back to the basics. And the thing is, I like going back to the basics because when most people would rather focus on the complex, the convoluted thing, I go back to the basics and make it simple. And that makes problem solving a little bit easier because I go back to the basics. That makes developing or creating a solution or an architecture a little bit simpler. Not easy, but simpler because I go back to the basics. I started this talk with making the statement that you still need the technical expertise. There is no escaping the technical expertise. You need to constantly practice, rehearse, even if you don't have the opportunity. The person that I was talking about earlier, he decided he wanted to learn always on availability groups because he's now being given the responsibility to take care of different always on availability group environments. But he only took that step when he was given responsibility. And it's interesting because we only prepare for the opportunity when it's already there rather than preparing for it even before it appears or even before it comes. And the reality is, learning a complex technology like always on availability groups can help you become a subject matter expert, because if you need to design or even implement one, you need to become a master of the fundamentals and the basics. Excuse me. And so, and this is something that I cover and help my clients with, working with always on available groups, because it is really more than just technology aspect. It is going back to the basics, and not only that, tying a specific technology with the basics and the fundamentals. And if there's something that you are interested in, and if you want to learn always on availability groups, because now you're giving the responsibility to take care of it, to manage it, use the link on the screen, schedule a strategy session, and let's have a conversation and see if I could be of help. We'll spend like 45 minutes to an hour talking about what your goals are, what it is that you want to accomplish. Do you just want to learn this for the sake of learning it, or you need this because you need to deploy something, a project within the next 2 to 3 months? We'll have a look at that. We'll look at um, the strategies on how to achieve your goals. And if we're a perfect fit, I'm more than happy to help you out. But if not, I'll steer you in the direction that would help you achieve your goals. Use that link on the screen, schedule a strategy session, and let's have that talk. And I'll be happy to help you in any way I can. All right. And that is about it. Man, I really do miss being in my home office again. Tune in again next week for another topic of conversation for the Practical SQL Server HADR show. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your weekend. I'll see you again next week.